first lecture, we will see how science and humanities began to be seen as separate disciplines and why there has been a need to have a meaningful dialogue between the two. Let us start with the two domains. The two domains of knowledge, science and humanities, are seemingly different. While certainty and accuracy are the attributes of science, humanities advocates creativity and critical thinking. Science is the study of natural world, whereas humanities is the study of human civilization and culture. We know that there are various forms of truth and different criteria of evaluating and validating each form of truth. Besides scientific truth achieved through investigation and examination, there are logical and mathematical truth and truth established in writing of history and court laws. There have been many philosophical approaches to deal with the forms of truth, ranging from notions of the synthetic a priori to deep analysis of induction, deduction and mathematical proof. However, it is often seen that knowledge systems that develop around these modes of establishing the truth are mutually exclusive. Science is synonymous with modern or the non-traditional. Science is often synonymous with physics and physics with Newton's Principia. Newton's Principia represent fundamental knowledge about the knowable in the universe as a knowledge about the underlying principle or laws besides the natural phenomena. Fundamental knowledge is teleological, all-encompassing, unified and hence grand theoretical. Thus, science, which originated in the West during the 17th century, embodies logocentric knowledge of authority, authenticity, openness, transparency, finality, certainty and universal credibility. Humanities originated as the basis of broad education for citizens. Along with grammar, rhetoric and logic, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy and music formed the bulk of medieval education. A major shift occurred in 15th century when humanities began to be regarded as a subject to study rather than practice. A corresponding shift occurred in the focus area from traditional subjects to areas such as history and literature. Now, let us see what is science. Science is concreted human effort to understand or to understand better the history of natural world and how the natural world works with observable physical evidence as the basis of that understanding. It is done through observation of natural phenomena or through experimentation that tries to stimulate natural processes under controlled conditions. For example, an ecologist observing territorial behavior of bluebirds and geologists examining the distribution of fossils in an outcrop are both scientists making observations in order to find patterns in natural phenomena. Any astrophysicist photographing distant galaxies and a climatologist shifting data from weather balloons similarly are also scientists making observations, but in more discrete setting. The example above are observational science, but there are also experimental science. A chemist observing the rates of one chemical reaction at a variety of temperatures and a nuclear physicist recording the result of bombardment of a particular kind of matter with neutrons are both scientists performing experiments to see what consist patterns emerge. A biologist observing the reaction of a particular tissue to various stimulants is likewise experimenting to find patterns of behavior. The critical commonality is that all these people are making and recording observations of nature or of stimulations of nature in order to learn more about how nature in the broadest sense works. So, we have seen what science entails. Now, let us see what humanities consist of. Since the 19th century, the humanities have generally been defined as the disciplines that investigate the expressions of the human mind. Such expressions can be language, music, art, literature, theatre, poetry, etc. Thus, philology, linguistics, musicology and the study of the visual art all belong to the realm of humanities, unlike the study of nature which belongs to the domain of science, such as physics, astronomy, chemistry and biology. Similarly, the study of human in the social context is one of the social sciences such as sociology, psychology, anthropology and economics, but these definitions are unsatisfactory. Mathematics is to a large extent a product of human mind, and yet it is not considered a humanistic discipline. A pragmatic stance may be more workable. Therefore, the humanities are the disciplines that are taught and studied at humanities faculties. According to this pragmatic definition, the humanities currently include linguistics, musicology, philology, literature studies, historical disciplines, including art, history and archaeology, as well as more recent fields such as film and television studies. In some countries, theology and philosophy are also taught in humanities faculty, whereas in others they are faculties in their own right. So, what are we trying to do in this course? We are actually trying to push disciplinary boundaries. Let us see how science and humanities began to be regarded as separate disciplines. Let us see how the disciplines as we know today emerged in history. In the 1800s started to see the development of the modern disciplinary system. So, before the 1800 there was nothing like a discipline. The disciplines that we know today started as scholars specializing in the field of interest, then continuing to share their knowledge with others. The scholars who have specialized in particular topic would collaborate together to determine definitions for the field of study in order to create the disciplines. As knowledge along with communities grew, the need for professions grew as well, and these communities and professions carved out the academic disciplines. Mathematics and music were some of the first disciplines that were taught in the Greek era. In the evolution of education, when Plato opened his academy, he taught social issues such as politics and education along the already established discipline of mathematics. Continuing with established disciplines, the Romans decided to focus more on the discipline of law. The earliest universities in Europe in the 1000 to 1100s taught such disciplines that were occupationally based, especially in a religious sense. Through the evolution of the disciplines, a mere 200 years after the first university in Europe were established, it was determined that higher education should involve either theology, law or medicine, as well as arts. With the growth of education, the universities started to see the development of professional schools which specialized in law or medicine. Academic societies and journals emerged. The development of the disciplines we know today has been an ongoing process since the beginning of human communication. The basis of knowledge formed into a specialization which eventually turned into the disciplines from various consultations of like-minded scholars. The basic disciplines that we know now, such as fine art, humanities, social science, science and mathematics, are still ever changing. Now, let us see how humanities emerge as a discipline. As we see that earlier it was a set of practices, but as an academic discipline, how it emerged. According to some scholars, the humanities originate in 5th century BC Greece, where we find the first focused development of tragedy or drama, comedy, philosophy and history, all the major disciplines included in the humanities today. Humanities was a part of the liberal arts. Also included under the umbrella of liberal arts were natural science, arts and social sciences. The liberal arts include those topics that are not professional or technical subjects. The term liberal arts originates from the mid 18th century, translated from the Latin ars liberalis, meaning works befitting a freeman. Referring to the core skills employed in the civic life and public debate of classical antiquity, the latter term liberal art were skills that were taught to foster virtue, knowledge and articulation. Such skills included grammar, rhetoric and logic, known in medieval times as the trivium, three of the foundation that would form the basis of the humanities. During the era of medieval church, the trivium was expanded to include natural science, incorporating arithmetic, geometric, music and astronomy. This new synthesis of the disciplines was referred to as the quadrivium. The term humanities comes from the Latin humanus, meaning human, cultured and refined, and originates with the Renaissance humanist who redefined the traditional subjects of trivium as the studia humanitis, removing logic and then adding to their newly defined corpus such disciplines as Greek studies. To complement the Latin grammar, history, poetry and ethics, thus the discipline of humanities was born. Further, let us see how the discipline of science was born. The first people to try and develop the theory behind their observations were the Greeks, people such as Pythagoras who concentrated on a mathematical view of the world. Similarly, Aristotle and Plato developed logical and methods for examining the world around them. It was the Greeks who first suggested that matter was made up of atoms, fundamental particles that could not be broken down further. But it was not only the Greeks who moved science on. science was also being developed in India, China, the Middle East and South America. Despite having their own cultural views of the world, they each independently developed materials such as gunpowder, soap and paper. However, it was not until the 13th century that much of the scientific work was brought together in European university, and that is started to look more like science as we know it today. Progress was relatively slow at first. For example, it took until the 16th century for Copernicus to revolutionize the way we look at the universe, and for Harvey to put forward his ideas on how blood circulated around the human body. This slow progress was sometimes the result of religious dogma, but it was also a product of troubled times. It was in the 17th century that modern science was really born, and the world began to be examined more closely using instruments such as the telescope, microscope, clock and barometer. It was also this time that scientific laws started to be put forward for such phenomena as gravity and the way that the volume, pressure and temperature of gas are related. In the 18th century, much of the basic biology and chemistry was developed as part of age of enlightenment. The 19th century saw some of the great names of science. People like the chemist John Dalton, who developed the atomic theory of matter, Michael Faraday and James Maxwell were both put forward theories concerning electricity and magnetism, and Charles Darwin, who proposed the controversial theory of evolution. Each of this development forced scientists radically to re-examine their views on the way in which the world worked. The last century brought discoveries such as relativity and quantum mechanics, which again required scientists to look at things in a completely different way. It makes you wonder what the iconoclastic discoveries of this century will be. The divide between science and humanities has been sharpened gradually. Policies and practices have been made the two disciplines watertight and in the subsequent times. The worldview that natural and human science are mutually exclusive has led to more crises than one. The separation. Historian Isaac Berlin traces the divorce between the sciences and humanities to philosophical historian Giambattista Vico. Vico denied that human beings possessed any alternable essence. Humans make their own history and understand their own doings in a fashion different than the way they understand external nature. Vico challenged the idea that there is only one set of methods to establish the truth. Instead of the Enlightenment view, a single set of principles applied to all knowledge. Vico applied his contrary thoughts and mounted an attack on the total claims made for the new scientific method. A great debate started, as Berlin indicates, of which the end is not in sight. Has this led to any crisis? Of course it has. The worldview that natural and human science are mutually exclusive has led to more crises than one. Over the years, policies have been made to fragment educational enterprises into cubicles, overlooking that new knowledge and new insights have often originated in the boundaries of disciplines. We have tended to imprison disciplinary studies in opaque walls. This has restricted flights of imagination and limited creativity. This character of our education has restrained and restricted individual right from the primary education and continues till the higher education level. This is particular while in the university level, because one of the requirement of a good university should be to engage in knowledge creations, not just for the learner but also for the society as a whole. Globalization in the 21st century has been seen to have brought about a dynamic change in the society. The present society is often referred to as techno-capitalist society. What appears to be surprising is the ineffectiveness of the system of education in preparing the youth competent enough to be serving the current techno-capitalist world system and its knowledge economy. The world today harps on technology and science, which is spawning new forms of corporate power and organizations. Corporations have erected a system of intellectual property rights to confiscate creativity, with profound impact on the economy, science and culture. With the growing global importance of intangibles like new knowledge and technological innovativeness, the inequalities between nations at the front of line of techno-capitalism and those that are not are widening. The complexities of the problem we face in a rapidly globalizing world demand solutions which are far more holistic. The interrelated nature of the growing challenges requires knowledge and methodologies which straddle several disciplines and draw out meaningful responses. It was the Rockefeller's Foundation in the early 1980s that pointed out the scientific literacy is no less vital a characteristic of an educated person than his or her ability to read and write. Furthermore, if science and technology aim to make inventions more creative and human, then a knowledge of the humanities must be coupled with an understanding of scientific inquiry and technological change. Our own in India, the committee which is most popularly known as the Yashwal Committee report suggested that the committee was formally called the Committee to Advise on Renovation and Rejuvenation of Higher Education, which was published in 2009. The committee recommended that the chasm that exists between theory and practice combined with a fragmentation with the idea of knowledge leads to the confusion that our systems of higher education is suffering. To overcome this, it would be necessary for universities to adopt a curricular approach that treats knowledge in a holistic manner and creates exciting opportunities for different kinds of interface between the disciplines, which is unthinkable today in most of the universities and institutions of higher learning. It is important that the universities relate outside and walls of the disciplines are porous enough to let other voices be heard. It would be necessary that the university education is seen in its totality and subject areas are not to be designed in isolation. This divide of course was at first very popularly pointed out by C.P. Snow, who in his lecture which in 1959 said that indicated that science and the humanities exist as separate cultures and stretched that both should work together to improve the quality of human life. So, what are we trying to achieve in this course? We are trying to achieve an interdisciplinary approach through this course. Interdisciplinary consists in creating a new object that belongs to no one. These are some of the reference you can look up. So, friends, from the next class onwards, we will see how folk art and science can come together to have a meaningful dialogue and new frontiers, new knowledges can be created in the frontiers of disciplinary boundaries. Thank you. See you next time.